Do you have a thought on the captaincy? Like, who's going to be captain? Is that of any importance, or what are you thinking with that?
No, they got a lot of bigger problems than who's going to be
Yeah.
captain. No, there will be no captain. It'll be David and Charlie McAvoy. I think Hampus Lindholm will be in the mix too, but yeah, it's either going to be David or Charlie is going to be the next captain. When that will be, who knows? Maybe that'll be next year. So much of it depends on them. Whether it's David, like, okay, he's the best player on the team. Does he really want that kind of pressure in terms of all the obligations of a captaincy? We'll see. And then with Charlie, like, let's look at the year he had last year. We don't know how he's going to come back. Is he going to come back and be the full Charlie that we've seen in years past, and also take on that next level presence category? We don't know. So we'll see. But as of now, no captain.
What are the responsibilities of a captain? I mean, leadership can come in a lot of different forms, a lot of different ways with a team, but specifically, what is the captain supposed to do and is obligated to do that you don't do if you're not the captain?
It's a great question. I remember Brad and Patrice being first to calls. Let's say I can recall a couple of years ago when Pavel Zacha was acquired by the Bruins in the offseason, one of the first calls was from Patrice. Brad, whenever guys would sign, and he became captain, whenever guys would sign, come July 1, he'd be the first to call, saying, the door is open. You can call me, call my wife, anything you need. It's that first introductory step in terms of welcoming players into the organization. And then the example that they set, nobody worked harder than Brad in the gym. Like, he'd show up at development camp and get on the bike next to these 18, 19-year-old kids. And who can help but fall in line behind that? And then Patrice was Patrice and Zdeno was Zdeno. So that's a high threshold that those guys have set. Those are a couple of things. And then, of course, there's media obligations. They're going to be first to be asked to speak after games, before games, all that. So there's a lot that goes into being captain.
Yeah, and I know Brad took it very seriously, and he had to be the one who faced everyone when things were going wrong.
There was a big change too from Brad over those last 3 years before he became captain. He was one way personality. It was one way when it was another way when he was a captain.
Well, Fluto knows, and I mean, I know he took it super seriously. Like, he, even to me, was like, we used to have him like do. I didn't even really want him to do it anymore, but we would have him like do like stuff, and he's like, dude, I don't like. He's like, I think I gotta like, I can't be like silly like that. So like, I mean, he took it really seriously. All right, so Fluto. I mentioned like a Brad Marchand and talking to them. I can't say the same about anyone on this team besides Pasternak that I've ever spoken to. So I look at these box scores from these preseason games, and I'm a little confused. But I read everything you write in The Athletic, and I appreciate it. And you've kind of talked about this camp, and this camp is very interesting because there are a lot of unknowns. So, are you pretty set on what you think the first line will be?
Yes.
Okay.
Kiki, Lindholm, Pasternak.
Okay.
Second line looks pretty set too.
Well, hang on a second. But so the way that I read what you're saying is first line set defensive. The defensive pairings are pretty much there. You're not concerned about the defense. They have a bunch of fourth line guys. It's the second and third lines, and what remains to be decided.
Absolutely. Yeah. First line set, fourth line set. Asimon, Corrali, Kastlik, most likely your fourth line, and that's a heck of a fourth line. Hard to play against. Yes, second and third lines. I think a lot of it, guys, has to come down with what they do with Zacha. I asked Marco Sturm earlier in camp, do you see Zacha more as a center or as a wing? He said, I don't know at the point. He said, I know I love him as a center. And you can understand why. Just because he's so responsible, he's so good in three zones. Just a first-year coach doesn't have to worry when Zacha is your center. Now, is he going to be your second-line center? Probably not. That's where Middlestat fits in. There's aside from Pasternak, that's probably your most skilled player in terms of playing with the puck and looking for line mates. Now, defensively, there's some shortcomings there with Casey. You're just going to have to live with that. So I think one of the options that they would consider is putting Zacha on the wing with Casey so he can take on some of that defensive heavy lifting. So that would open up number three center. Is that Mitten? Is that Patra? There's some options there. So yes, second and third line, There's some fixtures. There's Arvidsson, probably going to be your number 2 right wing. Middlestat, number 2 center. Jeannot, number 3 left wing. Other than that, I would say those there's 3 spots between those 6 forwards that there's still some balls in the air.
Well, talk a little bit more about the kids. And the name Fabian Lysell continues to pop up. Fraser Minton, everyone wants to see what this kid's going to do. How many of these kids, I know it's early, but how many of these kids do you think are going to be in uniform on opening night?
1. I think Minton right now is your number 3 center. I think he'd like to show a little bit more offense, a little bit more creativity, but that's a player with some growth potential in terms of being that third line, defensive, sharp, penalty kill, responsible, and the coach is going to grow to like that player.
So no Patra.
No, he's not. He's not ready. Ideally, he's your number 2 center down the road, but he's not beating out Middlestat at this point. Number 3 center, Marco wants a little bit of matchup play with the third line, and that's just not Matt's game at this point. So no, I think he starts the season in Providence. That's fine. I'm sure it's disappointing for a kid who's made the team out of camp first 2 years pro. But that's where he is in his game.
It's been an issue for the last couple of coaches how they've handled the young talent. Do you have a handle yet on Marco Sturm? I know what he said, but he's pretty stoic and he's not easy to read. Do you have a handle on how he feels about young talent and developing them?
I think he's going to like his veterans. He's going to like Lindholm. He's going to like Zaka. Obviously, Geeky and Pasternak. Now, the question is, like, we talk about these young players. Well, realistically, how many of these young players are currently NHL players right now? I don't see that many just being ready for that kind of responsibility. Now, if because they say, like, from the top down, yes, we expect to make the playoffs this year. Well, if that's the goal, then the coach is probably going to lean more on the veterans just because you need points. But then if it gets to a point where, well, we have to think about development and long-term issues, then perhaps you can incorporate more of these younger players. But again, Patra, probably not ready. Lysell, no, not going to beat out some of these other players right now. Minton is still a work in progress, although I think he is ready to be your third line center. Beyond that, there's not that many of these young kids that are really ready to make a push.
With all of this youth in front of him, that puts more on Jeremy Swayman's plate. I'm wondering, based on what he did last year and then his really good summer, what do you expect from him this coming season?
Regression back to the norm. I think that was an aberration last year just because all the circumstances were set in place, right? First, Linus gets traded. So that was just an ideal setup for both those guys. One plays one game, the other plays mentally, physically, everything. And we saw how well they got along with the hugs and this and that. It was just perfect relationship. So, of course, you disrupt that with the trade of Linus, and it had to be done. Then, of course, that's going to affect Jeremy. And then, of course, the training camp issue of not being signed and missing all of camp and then not coming in and not signing until 2 days before the season opener. Well, of course, you're going to be behind. And the pressure of that, I'm sure, was on Jeremy's mind. And then the team around him sucked. So, of course, he's and then you look at the history, right? It's been superb. College, American League, where he didn't stay that long. NHL, like the history's there. And then, yes, a very good performance in terms of World Championship this summer. So, yes, all the pieces are put in place for Jeremy to rebound. And, of course, he's going to need help from Jonas. I expect Jonas to take on more starts, too.
Well, I got to give you all the credit in the world for being able to sit through one of those preseason games and know what's going on. Because that, my friend, not only is they're hard names to pronounce as well, I got to be honest. And I love that Zadorov got that goal in overtime and just went by.
That was the best.
He was like, "Why am I out here?" And then he just said, "I'm getting out."
Not only do I have to travel, I had to play overtime.
Yeah,
I'm getting out of here.
He's like, "I'm walking this thing off."
We all feel the same way about preseason.
Yeah, I know.
Let's go.
That's why I said I got to give you a lot of credit for sitting through these things. Fluto's the best. Everyone knows that I love him. Fluto Shinzawa at The Athletic. I read everything he writes.
For all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.